September 1944. Camp Swift, Texas. The sun hit like a hammer on the open field where 50 German women stepped down from the back of a rattling army truck. Their gray uniforms still smelled of salt water and diesel from the crossing. Greta Hoffman pressed her palm against the truck's hot metal side, watching dust swirl around American soldiers unloading wooden crates beside an enormous grill. The air carried an unfamiliar scent, sweet, smoky, alive. Her stomach clenched. In Hamburg, they'd survived on thin soup and potato peels. Here, meat sizzled in open fire. Fat dripped into the flames, sending sparks dancing into the sky. "Don't stare," whispered Margaret, the older woman beside her. "Show no weakness." But Greta couldn't look away. A black man in a white apron flipped a steak the size of her hand. The smell alone felt like mockery. A voice cut through the heat. "Hoffman." A female sergeant approached, clipboard in hand. Her brown hair was tucked neatly under her cap. "You speak English?" Greta swallowed. "Yes." "Good. You'll translate for the others during orientation." Her tone wasn't cruel, just tired. "Welcome to Texas." The barracks smelled of pine and disinfectant. 20 metal bunks lined each wall. More space than Greta had seen in 2 years. Through the small window, she could still see the grill outside, smoke rising over the yard. The same cook was still there, moving with calm rhythm, the kind of ease that came from a full stomach and an unbroken life. "They're trying to fatten us up," murmured Ingrid, a narrow-faced woman who had once worked in a munitions factory. "Poison, probably," Margaret muttered. "Or propaganda. They want us soft." Greta said nothing. Her fingers found the photograph hidden in her pocket. Her brother Klaus, standing straight in his Wehrmacht uniform. His last word before she left: "Never trust them. Never forget who you are."
Sergeant Morrison returned with her clipboard. "You'll work in the base laundry. 3 meals daily, recreation time, medical care. Tonight, the commanders arranged a welcome dinner." Margaret's chin lifted. "We don't need their charity." Morrison's eyes flicked to Greta. "Translate that." Greta hesitated. The photo in her pocket seemed to burn against her thigh. "She says thank you." Morrison didn't respond, but a faint shadow crossed her face, something between disappointment and understanding. "Dinner's at 6. Don't be late." That evening the mess hall glowed under bare bulbs. 200 seats, yet only the 50 German women filled the long wooden tables, an island of gray uniforms surrounded by empty chairs. Greta's hands trembled as she held out her tray. The cook smiled as he loaded it. Mashed potatoes, green beans, cornbread, and Texas T-bone. "Best you'll ever eat." "It's too much," Greta murmured. "Your skin and bones," he said, adding an extra piece of cornbread. "Eat." At the table Margaret glared at her plate as though it were a test. "Obscene," she hissed. "While our families starve." "Our families are gone," Ingrid whispered, cutting a piece. "I'm done starving for ghosts." The sound of knives scraping plates spread slowly through the hall. Forks lifted. Then came the quiet gasps, the involuntary sighs. Greta looked down at her own steak, thick and glistening. She thought of Klaus's last letter: "Americans are soft. Weak. They drown in luxury while we build the future." She cut a small piece. The knife slid through like butter. The taste flooded her mouth: smoke, salt, sweetness. For a moment she forgot where she was. Across the table a woman began to cry. "God forgive me," she whispered. "It melts." Morrison appeared at the end of the table. "Tomorrow you start work. The war doesn't stop, even here." Greta swallowed. "Sergeant, why feed us like this?" "Because you're human beings," Morrison said simply. "Your government forgot that. We haven't." Margaret shoved her plate away untouched. "I won't be bought with meat." She left in silence. But Greta kept eating, slow deliberate bites, the photo of her brother burning in her pocket like a secret she no longer believed. The laundry steamed like a dragon's breath, clouds of heat curling from vats of boiling water. Greta fed sheets through a pressing machine the size of a tank, her skin slick with sweat and soap. The air smelled of starch and iron. Every clang of metal echoed against the tin roof like distant artillery. Beside her, a young woman hummed softly as she worked. Greta recognized the tune, an American swing melody she'd once heard through a radio in Hamburg before the war silenced music. "Stop that," Margaret hissed from across the room. "Have you no pride?" The girl, Anna, blushed and fell quiet. She couldn't have been more than 19, too young to remember Germany before the sirens and the rubble. The door opened. Sunlight slanted in, cutting through the steam. Jackson stood in the doorway, wiping his brow with a red bandana. Ladies, we're short on kitchen staff today. Need 3 volunteers. There's dessert in it for you, peach cobbler. No one spoke. Machines hissed. Anna's hand shot up. I'll go.
Anna, no, Margaret warned.
But Greta surprised herself. I'll go too. Sergeant Morrison appeared behind Jackson, arms crossed. You sure, Hoffman? It's not required. I'm sure. Greta set down the sheet she was folding. Somehow, the photo of Klaus in her pocket didn't feel as heavy as before. The 3 women followed Jackson through the base. The late sun turned everything gold. The barracks, the fences, the baseball field where American soldiers laughed like boys. Greta stared at their ease, at the world they lived in.
No craters, no ashes.
Just music and green grass. The kitchen gleamed with polished steel and white tile. A radio in the corner played trumpets and laughter. Jackson handed them each an apron and a knife. Carrots, potatoes, onions. Just keep your fingers attached and we'll get along fine. Anna peeled carrots with nervous energy. Greta began slicing potatoes, the repetitive rhythm soothing. Jackson's voice broke the quiet. You worked in kitchens before? My mother's restaurant, Greta said softly. In Hamburg. Before the bombs. He nodded. My brother died at Normandy. He was 20. The knife froze in her hand.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Jackson said, his voice calm. But hating you won't bring him back. My mama taught me that. Sophie, the 3rd woman, stared down at her cutting board. The Americans who bombed Hamburg, she said quietly. Do they know what they did? 40,000 people burned in one night. Jackson's hands stilled. I don't know, he said. Same way you probably didn't know what was happening in. He stopped. Greta's knife slipped, nicking her finger. Please, she whispered. Don't. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, grief recognizing itself. The door slammed open. Sergeant Morrison strode in, face pale. Hoffman, come with me. In the infirmary, Margaret lay on a cot, her face swollen, lips split. The doctor worked silently, cleaning dried blood from her cheek. What happened? Greta demanded. Altercation with another prisoner, Morrison said. Margaret accused her of collaboration. Collaboration. Greta's voice rose. We've been here 3 days. Apparently that's long enough. But Greta knew it wasn't. Because she had read Klaus's letter. The one she had hidden, the one she had never shown anyone. We are doing necessary work here, sister. Difficult work. History will judge us as heroes. But I want to come home. I want to forget the smell. She had told herself it was exhaustion, delirium, propaganda of another kind. But now she saw what the camera saw, what Klaus had smelled, what he had done. When the lights came up, the room was silent. The kind of silence that hums in your bones. Some women stared at the floor. Others sat frozen, tears streaking down gray-dusted cheeks. Margaret's jaw was tight, her eyes hard. Commander Wilson stepped forward. You served Germany, he said evenly. You may not have known, but you were part of this. I don't say that to condemn you, but to make sure you understand what blind obedience leads to. We didn't know, Ingrid cried out suddenly. We didn't know any of this. Didn't you? Wilson asked quietly. His question hung in the air, heavy as lead. Morrison's boots clicked softly on the floor as she approached Greta's row. Hoffman, she whispered, are you all right? Greta didn't answer. She reached slowly into her pocket and pulled out the photograph. Beneath it was the folded letter, creased, yellowed, her brother's handwriting trembling across the page. I need to tell you something, she said, her voice barely a whisper. About my brother. About what he told me. Morrison leaned closer. What kind of things? Names, Greta said. Officers. Places. What he saw. What he did. Her voice broke. I kept it hidden because I didn't want to believe it was real. But I knew. Morrison's eyes widened. You have information? Yes, Greta said, her voice growing stronger. And I'm going to tell you everything. Even if they call me a traitor. She glanced toward Margaret, whose stare was already burning through her. Even if it means betraying him. Margaret opened one bruised eye. They're poisoning us with kindness, she rasped. Making us forget. Forget what? That we're German. Her grip caught Greta's wrist, trembling but fierce. Your brother Klaus, what would he think seeing you in their kitchen? Smiling. The name hit her like a slap. Greta pulled free, turning away. Klaus isn't here. Exactly. Margaret's breath rattled.
None of our men are here.
We must stay pure. The doctor cleared his throat. She needs rest.
Outside, dusk had fallen.
Smoke drifted from the mess hall, carrying that same unbearable scent of grilled meat. Morrison walked beside Greta in silence until she said quietly, "You're in a hard spot.
Between two worlds."
I'm not between anything, Greta said. But even as the words left her, she knew they weren't true. They passed the baseball field again. Anna sat on the bleachers watching soldiers play, her face soft in the orange light. She looked, Greta realized, like someone who had stepped out of the war for a moment and forgotten it existed. Morrison stopped walking. You're carrying something, Hoffman. Something you haven't said.
Greta's heart jumped.
I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. Morrison's eyes were steady, kind but unrelenting. Whatever it is, it's eating you alive. The photograph in Greta's pocket seemed to burn again. Klaus's last letter, its words she'd read once and never dared to read again. Morrison's tone softened. Tomorrow there's a film screening. The commander wants all of you there.
It's important.
About what?
Morrison hesitated.
About what we found when we liberated the camps in Europe. Greta felt the ground tilt under her feet. The recreation hall was cold despite the Texas heat outside. 50 German women sat in neat rows facing a blank white screen, their gray uniforms crisp, their faces guarded. The air smelled faintly of soap and dust, but beneath it was tension, thick and humming. Greta sat in the second row, the photograph of Klaus pressed in her palms so tightly she could feel the edges cutting her skin. Commander Wilson stood at the front, his medals gleaming under the lights. Ladies, he began, his voice firm but not cruel, what you're about to see is difficult. But it's time you know the truth about the regime you served. Margaret's voice came sharp from behind Greta.
Propaganda, she hissed. Don't believe it. The lights dimmed.
The projector whirred to life.
The first images flickered on the wall. Grainy black and white footage of men and women standing behind barbed skeletal, ice hollow.
The camera moved slowly across a landscape of ruin.
Mountains of shoes.
Heaps of children's clothing. A sea of eyeglasses glinting like shards of ice.
Someone gasped.
Another woman began to sob quietly. The narrator's voice was dry and factual. Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. Liberated by British forces, April 1945.
Over 60,000 prisoners dead.
A woman in the front row clamped her hands over her mouth and vomited onto the floor. The guards moved forward, then froze, unsure what to do. Greta couldn't breathe. She wanted to close her eyes, but she couldn't. The screen changed, soldiers in gas masks bulldozing piles of bodies into open graves.
The machine of the machine made the corpses look like broken dolls.
This is fake, someone whispered. It has to be fake. Margaret stood abruptly. You are dead to U.S. Hoffman, she shouted in German. Dead to Germany. Greta rose to her feet, her hands trembling. Then let it die, she said. Because that Germany deserves to. The photograph slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the floor face down.
She didn't pick it up.
Hours later, in a small interrogation room, the air hummed with the sound of a typewriter. Morrison sat across from Greta, her tone gentle. Commander Wilson stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back. Start from the beginning, Morrison said. When did your brother first write about the camp? Greta's voice was steady now, stripped of everything but truth. December 1943. He was stationed at Mauthausen, in Austria.
He called it a work camp.
Said they were processing enemies of the state. The typist's keys clicked rapidly. Later, his tone changed, Greta continued. He wrote about the quarry, men forced to carry stones up 186 steps. He said most never made it a month. He mentioned 3 officers.
SS Commanders Karl Schulz, Franz Hartmann, and Wilhelm Kepler.
Klaus said Kepler enjoyed it. Wilson turned from the window. You're certain of the names?
Yes.
And there's more. She pulled a crumpled envelope from her pocket. The last letter he sent. March 1945. He planned to destroy records, flee to South America. There are bank accounts, safe houses, everything. Wilson read the letter through his glasses, his jaw tightening. This is valuable intelligence, Miss Hoffman. Why didn't you give it sooner? Greta's voice cracked. Because he was my brother. Because I wanted to believe he wasn't a monster. She gestured helplessly toward the direction of the hall where the projector had run. But I was wrong. Wilson nodded slowly. Then you've done the right thing now. Greta stepped closer. I came to understand. Morrison stayed near the door, silent. Why, Margaret? Greta asked softly. Why risk everything? Margaret's eyes blazed. Because someone has to remember who we were. Someone has to carry our truth, not their propaganda. We were soldiers.
We followed orders.
We believed in something greater than ourselves. You believed in mass murder, Greta said. We believed in Germany. Margaret slammed her cuffed hands against the bench. And you, traitor that you are, you want to erase it. Pretend you were never one of us. I don't want to erase anything, Greta said. I just want to stop being haunted. I want to sleep without seeing Klaus's face. I want to eat without guilt. I want to live. Margaret sneered. Then you're a coward. Maybe, Greta whispered. But I'm a coward who'll help bring men like Klaus to justice. Who'll tell the truth, no matter how much it hurts. Morrison stepped forward. Wagner, save your breath. The asylum board approved Hoffman's application an hour ago. She's a U.S. resident now. Margaret's face drained of color. I'm sorry, Greta said quietly. Sorry we believed in a lie. Sorry I let it take so much from us.
But I'm done.
Margaret stared at her with burning hatred. You'll never be free of this. You'll carry it forever.
I know, Greta said.
But at least now I'll carry the truth too. Outside, the Texas stars burned sharp and endless. Morrison laid a hand on Greta's shoulder. You did the right thing. Greta looked up at the sky.
Maybe.
Or maybe I just chose the easier prison. Jackson appeared with 2 steaming mugs. There's no easy choice in war, he said, handing her one. Only the ones you can live with. The coffee was bitter and burnt. Greta drank it anyway. It tasted real.
Brennan shook his head.
You're not going anywhere near her. This is a military matter. She wrote that note to me, Greta said, standing.
She'll talk to me.
She might even listen. Morrison hesitated, then looked at Wilson.
She's right.
If anyone can get through to Wagner, it's her.
Wilson exhaled. Fine.
But I'm going too. By nightfall, a jeep roared down the empty Texas highway, its headlights slicing through the dark. Jackson drove, eyes fixed on the road. I know these backroads, he told them. And if she's hiding, a black man behind the wheel of a jeep draws less attention than a convoy of soldiers. The air was thick and hot. Greta sat between Morrison and another guard, her stomach tight with dread. She's been gone 6 hours, Morrison said, checking her watch. Could be anywhere by now.
She's on foot, Greta said.
She doesn't know Texas. She'll find other Germans, structure, orders to follow. The jeep turned off the main road. In the distance, floodlights cut through the darkness. Camp Koenig. Rows of fences shimmered in the heat, towers rising like ghosts. At the gate, a young soldier saluted. Evening, Sergeant. What brings you out this late? Escaped prisoner, Morrison said, showing him Margaret's photo. Gray hair, about 50, limited English. The guard's face changed. You're in luck. A woman matching that description showed up here 2 hours ago. Tried talking to our POWs during recreation hour. Where is she now?
In holding.
They followed him through the compound, the night air buzzing with the murmurs of sleepless prisoners. Greta felt their eyes on her from the shadows, eyes filled with suspicion, pity, or something darker. The holding cell was small, its walls bare concrete. A single bulb hung from the ceiling. Margaret sat on a metal bench, her hands cuffed, her face newly bruised. Greta, she said as they entered, voice calm and cold.
Come to gloat.
The third officer, a major with sharp features, frowned. Are you saying your entire community was complicit? Greta met his gaze.
Not everyone. But enough.
And I can't go back and pretend I don't know that.
Brennan tapped his pen.
You realize you'll face hostility here, too? Americans lost sons in this war. You'll be seen as the enemy. I am the enemy, Greta said simply.
Or I was.
That's what I'm trying to change. Before anyone could answer, the door opened. Sergeant Morrison entered, her face tight.
Sir, we have a situation.
One of the female prisoners, Margaret Wagner, has escaped. The room came alive. Radios crackled, chairs scraped. Greta's blood ran cold.
How? Brennan demanded.
During recreation hour. 2 others created a diversion.
She had help. Morrison hesitated.
We found a note addressed to Hoffman. Greta took the crumpled paper, recognizing Margaret's sharp handwriting. You think you can hide behind their mercy? You think they'll forgive you? I'm going to find the men you named.
I'll warn them.
And then I'll come for you. Greta looked up, her voice barely steady. She's going to Germany. To warn the SS officers before they're caught. Wilson entered, his expression grim. Can she make it that far?
If she has contacts, yes, Morrison said.
She was always the true believer.
We have to stop her, Greta said.
I know where she'll go. Wilson's eyes narrowed.
Where?
The men's camp north of here, Camp Koenig. She'll look for sympathizers, someone to help her escape.
The door burst open.
2 guards entered, flanking Margaret. Her lip was still bruised, her eyes alive with fury. You gave them his letters, she spat. You betrayed your own blood. I gave them the truth, Greta said quietly, switching to English. Something our country forgot how to do. Margaret's voice shook with rage. You think they'll let you live among them? You think you can wash off what you are?
Maybe not, Greta said.
But I can try to be someone else. 6 weeks later, the air in Texas had shifted. The cicadas were louder, the heat heavier, but inside the administrative building, Greta sat perfectly still. The asylum board's hearing room smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. 3 American officers sat behind a long mahogany desk, uniforms pressed, faces unreadable. She felt their eyes on her like a weight. Miss Hoffman, said the senior officer, Colonel Brennan, his voice crisp and northern. Your cooperation has been confirmed. The intelligence you provided has led to the capture of 2 SS officers. Schultz was arrested in Vienna last week. Greta's hands tightened in her lap. And the others? We're still searching, Brennan said, adjusting his glasses. But that's not why we're here today. You're requesting permanent asylum in the United States. You understand this means renouncing your German citizenship.
I understand.
You'll likely never see Germany again. Greta stared at the table's polished surface. There's nothing left to see.
Hamburg is gone.
My family is gone. The younger officer beside Brennan leaned forward. Why America? Why not return home and help rebuild? Greta opened a small notebook she carried everywhere now. Inside were lists of names, fragments of memories, things Klaus had mentioned. Because I know what they'll rebuild, she said softly. They'll sweep everything under the rug. Pretend they didn't know. My neighbors in Hamburg, shopkeepers, teachers, they all looked away. They knew enough to stay silent. 6 months later, the war had ended, and with it the camp. Greta now worked in a restaurant on a quiet corner in downtown Austin. The air inside was thick with the smell of butter and mesquite smoke. She wore a clean white apron, her hair tied up, her hands steady as she turned a ribeye on the grill. Jackson's restaurant had become a small success, filled every night with soldiers on leave, families laughing over warm plates, and couples trying to forget that the world had nearly torn itself apart.
Order up. Jackson kellet from the front.
2 ribeyes, medium rare, and extra seasoning for table 6. He leaned into the kitchen doorway, smiling. And Greta, table 6 is asking for the cook. Says the schnitzel is better than his grandmother's. Greta smiled back, something that once felt impossible. She wiped her hands on her apron, untied it, and stepped into the dining room. The restaurant was alive with low conversation and clinking glasses. At table 6 sat an older man with silver hair and kind eyes. He rose when he saw her. You must be the cook, he said warmly. That was extraordinary. Thank you, Greta said, her German accent softened but still present. My name's Robert Feldman, the man continued. I teach history at the university. My wife was from Munich, she passed a few years ago. I haven't tasted schnitzel like that since before the war. Before everything, Greta said quietly.
He nodded.
Jackson tells me you're from Hamburg. He also mentioned you're writing down your experiences for the archives.
Yes, she said.
For months, she had filled notebooks. Klaus's letters, her memories of the camp, the women she had lived among, the moments of kindness that had broken through the darkness. Morrison had connected her with the prosecutors preparing for trials in Nuremberg.
Feldman hesitated.
Would you consider speaking to my students? About the war, about complicity. They need to understand how it happens, how ordinary people lose themselves.
Greta's throat tightened.
There's nothing ordinary about what we became. I think that's exactly the point, he said gently. Evil isn't born.
It's built, choice by choice.
Before Greta could answer, the door chimed. A woman entered, timid, clutching her handbag. For a moment, Greta didn't recognize her. Then memory struck like lightning.
Anna.
Anna looked up, eyes filling with tears. I heard you were here, she said, voice trembling. I didn't know where else to go. The others won't speak to me. They call me traitor for testifying. Sit, Greta said quickly.
Have you eaten? Anna hesitated. I can't pay.
Sit. Greta repeated firmly.
She returned to the kitchen and plated schnitzel, potatoes, and greens. When she came back, Anna was crying quietly. Feldman was speaking to her in gentle German. She needs work, he said to Greta. I know a boarding house. Respectable place. And my colleague could use help in the kitchen.
Greta frowned.
Why are you helping us?
We're Germans.
Feldman smiled faintly.
Miss Hoffman, I'm Jewish.
My parents fled Berlin in 1936. My cousins didn't make it. But my mother taught me, judge people by what they do now, not what they were forced to be. Jackson appeared with coffee. Greta, I'm thinking what you're thinking. We need another cook.
He winked at Anna.
You ever worked in a kitchen? My father owned a bakery before the war.
Close enough.
Start Monday. For a moment, Greta looked around the table. 2 Germans, a Jewish professor, and an African-American man sitting together in a Texas restaurant, building something small and good out of the ruins of the world.
Then, through the window, a shadow moved. Greta froze. Margaret.
She stood on the sidewalk, dressed in civilian clothes, her expression hard, eyes burning with something wild and unfinished. Their gazes met for one heartbeat before she turned and vanished into the night. Morrison appeared moments later, wearing plain clothes, a pistol holstered under her jacket. She had seen it too. She was supposed to be deported this morning, Morrison said.
To Germany.
Then why is she still here?
Greta whispered.
I'm going to find out.
The knock came at midnight.
Greta's apartment above the restaurant was small but warm, the walls lined with her notebooks. She opened the door with the revolver Morrison had given her for protection. Margaret stood there, flanked by 2 men in dark suits.
Hello, Greta, she said softly. May we come in?
No. Greta's hand trembled, but the gun stayed steady. You missed your train. On purpose, Margaret said. These gentlemen have a proposal. A way for you to help people. Greta laughed once, bitter and low. People like the men I named?
One of the men stepped forward.
His German was smooth. Their families.
Their children.
Innocent people will suffer if they're executed. You could recant your testimony, say the Americans coerced you. Some of the officers might go free. In exchange for what?
Money, Margaret said simply. A new life.
Buenos Aires, Mavi. São Paulo.
Places that welcome Germans. Greta's laughter broke into something sharp. You think I'd sell my soul again? Margaret's eyes glistened. You're tired, Greta. You dream of Klaus every night. You wonder if you could have stopped him.
Greta's throat tightened.
The gun wavered. I think you're desperate, she said finally. I think you're being used. From the shadows at the end of the hall came Morrison's voice. She is. Morrison stepped forward, gun drawn, Jackson and 2 MPs behind her.
The men bolted.
Boots thundered down the stairs. Margaret didn't move. Why couldn't you just stay quiet? She whispered in German. Why did you have to ruin everything? Because silence made the camps possible, Greta said. Silence made my brother a killer. She lowered the gun.
And I loved him anyway.
But I won't protect his crimes. Morrison handcuffed Margaret. Attempted witness intimidation, conspiracy to obstruct justice. Real prison this time. Margaret's voice was soft now. You'll never be free of this, Greta.
I know, Greta said.
But at least I'll carry the truth. 3 years later, Greta stood in a courtroom in Nuremberg. She was no longer a prisoner or a refugee but a witness. The man on trial, Franz Hartmann, one of the names Klaus had written, sat behind glass, his face older, hollow, unrepentant. Greta read from her brother's letters, from her own memories, from the words of survivors who had endured what he built. Her voice was steady, stripped of hatred but full of truth. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, Hartman didn't look at her. But she looked at him, and saw not a monster, but a man who had made so many small choices that evil had become ordinary. Outside, Morrison, Jackson, and Anna waited.
How do you feel? Anna asked. Heavy, Greta said.
Like I'm still carrying those stones up the quarry steps.
But lighter, too.
Like I can finally see the top. Jackson handed her a telegram.
From Austin.
Professor Feldman's students want you to give a permanent lecture series. Complicity, memory, redemption. Sounds like your kind of subject. Greta smiled faintly. Can anything be redeemed?
Maybe not, Morrison said.
But you can help others avoid needing redemption. That's worth something. Greta looked out at the city rising from its ruins. The German sky was still hers, even if the country no longer was. Yes, she said quietly. It's worth everything.
That night, she dreamed of Klaus. He wasn't in uniform.
He was young again, in their mother's kitchen, dusted with flour, laughing as he helped bake bread. I'm sorry I couldn't save you, she whispered. He smiled gently. Save yourself, Greta.
That's enough.
When she woke, sunlight was already warming her small Austin apartment. Below, the restaurant came alive with the smell of coffee and sizzling butter. She went downstairs, tied on her apron, and began cooking breakfast for strangers, people from nations that had once been enemies. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't redemption. But it was something real.
A meal shared. A truth spoken. A small light against the dark.